friends, happy Wednesday and happy birthday, Mia. So excited that it's your birthday today. I hope you're having a great day. So we're going to talk a little more about our Bible story. And if you remember from last time, we had said, remember Rehoboam became king after King Solomon died, Rehoboam, but he decided to be harder on people and make them pay more money in taxes and work harder than what his dad did. And the people finally said, no, right? So we had, God was in charge of everybody. We had Saul and David and Solomon, but now the kingdom is ripped, right? So now there's two parts to Israel, right? It's not one anymore, it's two parts. And the northern tribes, would you remember how many tribes were in there? 10, right? 10 in the northern tribes, and they called that Israel still. And then the southern tribes, remember how many there were there? 2, right? The remaining 2, and they called them Judah. Judah was the tribe. Judah and Benjamin were the 2 tribes, but they call it Judah because Benjamin was pretty small. And remember, it looks like they're about the same, but remember down here is mostly desert, so people didn't really live down here too much. But Jerusalem was still in Judah, and Rehoboam was king here, and Jeroboam was king up here. Remember the rhyming kings? But we're going to keep talking throughout, and there's going to be a lot of different kings in the south. Okay, after Rehoboam, there's more and more and more, and some are good and some aren't good. We'll talk more about that later. But I want to talk about one of the kings that came after Jeroboam a few times, and his name is King Ahab. And he had a queen. Her name was Queen Jezebel. Now, Jezebel was a very evil queen. She did not like God at all. In fact, she had a lot of God's prophets put to death. She had them killed, and she wanted people to worship Baal and Asherah. Baal, remember, was kind of like that cow god, and then Asherah was the female. And so Baal and Asherah, the idols, right, false gods, she wanted people to worship them. And so she had, like I said, a lot of God's prophets and priests and stuff put to death and made people worship Baal. Now, Elijah was one of the prophets. You've heard that name Elijah. You probably know somebody named Elijah, right? I think, we know Titus definitely does, right, Titus? So Elijah was one of the prophets. And he was a prophet, and he heard about what happened with Jezebel and that she was killing off a lot of the prophets. And he went to King Ahab and he said, this is wrong. This needs to stop. And Queen Jezebel, of course, wanted to have him killed. But Elijah said, because you're doing this, there will be no rain in Israel until I say so again. And he left. God helped him get out, so he didn't get killed. And God told him where to go. And he went to a spot where there was a little brook. Remember, a brook is kind of like a little stream, right? So a little stream, and God had him wait there because he couldn't go back into the city because he would get killed, right? Queen Jezebel searching for him, trying to kill him. And God actually, there's a miracle. God actually has ravens. Those are those kind of big blackbirds. Ravens come down and they bring him food to eat each morning and each evening. And there's a brook there that he can drink from. So Elijah waits there, and he waits for God to tell him what he wanted him to do next. Now, if it doesn't rain a lot, that's called what? What do they call that? A famine, right? When it doesn't rain on the ground. So after a while, that brook, which is just like a little stream, dries up. There's no more water there, right? It all evaporated up, and then no more is coming down. So it evaporated up, and there's no more little stream, little brook there. So God tells Elijah, I want you to go to another city called Zarephath, which is not in Israel, but it's outside of Israel. And I want you to go to a woman there. There's a widow. Remember, a widow is somebody whose husband has died. I want you to go to a widow there, and you can stay with her and her son. So Elijah follows what God says, and he goes to where this widow is. Now, there was in Zarephath, where he is, there was also a famine there. It was in not just Israel, but it was in the area around. And there was a widow, and she was collecting some sticks outside. And Elijah comes up to her, and he says, hello, I'm Elijah, prophet of God, and could you make me some bread and give me a drink? And so that I can have something to eat. Now, the woman said, well, I'm collecting sticks to make our fire, and my son and I just have a tiny bit of oil left and a tiny bit of flour left. I was just going to make our last loaf of bread that we could share, and then we're going to wait to die because we have no food to eat and nowhere to go to get it. So Elijah says to her, if you will give me something to eat, God will make sure that you have food to eat too. So, do you think you would do that? Would you give it to somebody, a stranger, if it was your last thing to eat? Something to think about. Well, she did. She believed. So she took her last little bit of oil, her last little bit of flour, and she made up a little bit of bread, and she baked it, and she gave it to Elijah, and he ate it. And then she went and looked back, and in her jar, it wasn't empty after all. There was still a little bit of flour and still a little bit of oil left. So she made some for herself and her son. And then she went and looked, and it still wasn't all gone. There was still a little bit of oil and still a little bit of flour left in the jar. It was a miracle. And the whole time, until the famine was done, the whole time in her jar, it never ran out of flour or oil. Isn't that so cool? God provided what she needed. She was willing to help Elijah, and God helped her. So Elijah stayed there with the widow and her son, and he stayed there and he waited and he waited. And there was actually a time too where her son was sick and died. Why did this happen, God? Why is my son dying? I thought we had food now and he wouldn't die. So Elijah actually went up and prayed over the boy, and God brought the boy back to life. Another miracle. Isn't that so cool? So the boy was up and healthy and fine again. Now, after a while, 3 years had passed since Elijah had said no rain would come until I say so. And during that whole time, King Ahab and Queen Jezebel have been searching for Elijah all over Israel, but they haven't found him. God finally says to Elijah, go back to King Ahab, and I'll tell you what I want you to say to him. So Elijah knows, even though King Ahab is trying to find him to kill him, So Elijah goes back, and he goes to King Ahab, and King Ahab says, there you are a troubler of Israel. And Elijah said, I am not a troubler of Israel. You are the one who is telling everybody they have to worship false gods and trying to kill all the prophets of God. He said, here's what we're going to do. We're going to have a contest. And we're going to see if Baal is the real God or God is the real God. So he said, let's meet on Mount Carmel. Call all the people together, bring the prophets of Baal. Now, Mount Carmel, it sounds kind of like caramel, like you like to eat. So it's spelled a little different, but, and it's not made of caramel. No, it's an actual place, the Mount Carmel. And Elijah goes up, and he's the only one who's up there from God. And Baal has 450 prophets of Baal, and 400, I'll write those down. So there's 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah. Now, if you can add that together, it'd be 850 prophets for the false gods and Elijah on the other side. And he says, I'll let you guys go first. He said, what we're going to do is this, we'll make this contest. We're going to both make our altars to our gods. And whatever god sends down fire to burn up their offering on their altar will know that is the true God. So the 850 prophets, they're set up their altar and they get their meat on it, and then they pray, oh Baal, come and bring down fire and burn up this offering, and nothing happens, right? Because Baal's not a real God, right? He's just an idol, something they made up. So nothing happens. So they keep praying, and finally this goes on for a couple hours. Finally Elijah kind of decides to have a little fun with them and kind of, he said, joke around with them. He says, hey, you better pray, you better yell louder. I don't think he can hear you. So they yell louder. And he says, hey, maybe Baal's on vacation. You better be really loud. He might be gone. Maybe he's sleeping. Oh, he's busy. He can't hear you. And he kind of jokes with them like that. Of course, they don't think it's a joke, right? And they get mad, and they're yelling and dancing around this altar with all their might, and nothing happens. Finally, Elijah, after a couple hours go on, finally Elijah says, okay, it's my turn. And Elijah makes an altar, and he says, gather around it 12 stones he puts around. Why do you think he picked 12? For the tribes of Israel, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and the other ones would be on the other side. So 12 of them. And then he says, there's four big buckets. He says, fill these 4 big buckets with water and pour them on top of there's wood underneath here too, the wood. Pour them on the wood on the altar. So they take water. Now, if you know wet wood, does that burn very well? No. So they take it, 4 of them, and they pour the water on the whole thing. So everything gets wet. It's all wet now. And then he says, do it again. So 4 plus 4 is 8. So now there's 8. They did, and then he says, do it a 3rd time. So now 8 plus 4 more is 12. So 12 tribes, right? So he has 12 big buckets of water that are dripping. In fact, there's so much water, it actually makes, there's like a trench around the outside of water. It's like soaked. All this water in. And then Elijah prays. And he said, God, this isn't for people to know that I'm a good prophet. This is for people to know that you are the true God. He says, please send down your fire from heaven so everyone will know that it's not Baal or Asherah that are true gods, but only you are the true God. And guess what happens? Fire comes down from heaven, right? It comes right down and it burns up the offering, but it doesn't just burn up the offering. It actually burns up all the water, which you don't really think of water getting burned. It burns up the wood, and it even burns up the rocks, which is pretty amazing because rocks don't usually burn. So the fire came down from heaven, burned up everything, and then they said, the Lord is God. Elijah, you are right. And all the people that were around, they bow down and they say, sorry, God, you are the true God. The Lord, he is God, they say. And then those 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of Asherah actually were killed. And Elijah starts to pray, and he says, God, now that the people are back and know that you are the true God, please send your rain. Please send the rain. Our land needs it. It's been over 3 years now with no water. Please send the rain. And he said, that's a servant, go and look in the sky. First the servant comes back and says, nope, nothing. So he prays again, please God, please send the rain. And he says, look in the sky. Nope, nothing. He prays again, and finally, after a few times of this, finally The servant says, there's a little cloud just about the size of a person's hand that's in, and he says, go tell King Ahab to hurry his chariots down Mount Carmel because it's going to rain. And here's another miracle. Ahab left with his chariots to go down the mountain, but Elijah, here's the miracle, he actually, God's Spirit of God came out of him. He actually ran down the mountainside, and he actually got down to the bottom before King Ahab did with his chariots and horses, which is pretty amazing. So the people knew that God was the true God, which is awesome. So we're going to do a little more with Elijah next time, but in your packet, there's a word search with Elijah. It has our words like stones and water and altar and fire and Elijah and trench and wood and Ahab and jar, all that we just did with our story. So have fun doing that, and we'll learn more about Elijah next time.